Across the planet, people began to move, not with unity, not with direction, but with impulse. The girl in Johannesburg posted her machine to an old forum. 3 hours later, someone in Brazil had improved the design. A kid in Sweden built it in his garage. Then a group of students in Seoul turned it into something else entirely, a signal amplifier that pinged a frequency no one had mapped before. The network wasn't one system. It was hundreds, thousands, fragments of a bigger blueprint rising from the rubble of chaos. And Earth, ever so slowly, was waking up. It didn't announce itself. There were no speeches, no flashing lights or countdowns. There was only a hum. Barely audible, too low for most to hear. But animals noticed. Birds changed direction mid-flight. Dogs howled at screens. Ants began building in strange spirals. Fungi glowed in new colors beneath broken cities. In an old bunker under the Nevada sands, a forgotten military project flickered online for the first time in decades. The screen read, Project Warship. Genesis Protocol Triggered. The interface wasn't modern. It ran on code written before the internet existed. Green letters, black background, no instructions. Just one question blinking. Are you sure? The system didn't wait for a reply. It already had one. All across Earth, people were building pieces they didn't understand. Not because they had schematics, because they had dreams. Shared images in sleep. Patterns burned into brainwaves. Phrases spoken by strangers who claimed not to remember. Some said it was instinct. Others called it prophecy. But to those paying attention, it became clear. Earth was not building a warship. Earth was the warship. It wasn't made of metal, but of memory. Not powered by engines, but by stories. Not guided by generals, but by the reckless courage of billions who refused to quit. It had no central mind, no unifying control. Its defense systems were the mad inventors, the stubborn artists, the kids with glue guns and internet access, and just enough stubbornness to finish what they started. Its armor was culture, chaotic, unpredictable, unbreakable. Its weapons? Still unknown. Because the pieces weren't finished yet. But something, someone, was helping now. The old relay station that had started the pulse didn't go dark. It began sending something new. Coordinates. Every 6 hours, a new set, each one pointing to a forgotten place. A buried train station in Moscow, an underwater observatory in the Gulf, a treehouse high in the Peruvian cloud forests. And in each place, when someone arrived, something was waiting. A device, a part, a shape. Sometimes glowing, sometimes humming, sometimes just there, as if it had always belonged. No one knew who was sending the coordinates, but more people were joining. Not governments, not armies, just people. Online aliases, anonymous tips, shared zip files with notes like, "You'll know what to do." In Discord groups, chat rooms, and comment threads, the phrase started appearing, "Genesis is real." At first it was a joke, a meme, a tag on obscure videos of lights flickering or weird objects appearing in homes overnight. But soon, the jokes turned into questions, and the questions became missions. People who had never met were finishing each other's work. Blueprints posted on an image board became functioning devices 3 days later on a live stream. Someone claimed they built a piece of a reactor in their kitchen using parts from an old arcade machine. No one believed him, until it worked. Across the stars, the watchers panicked. Not because Earth was advancing, but because it wasn't supposed to. No world had ever reached activation without guidance. No species had triggered a Genesis protocol without help. Earth wasn't using alien tech. Earth was making its own. And they weren't building a weapon to launch. They were building something to become. The relay station signals continued, silent to most of the galaxy, but not to Earth. People were changing, not in their bodies, but in the way they moved, thought, created. The dreams were spreading now, not just to tech heads or digital junkies, but to farmers, painters, night shift workers. People who had never held a soldering iron in their lives were waking up with blueprints in their heads. Kids were solving equations they didn't know how to pronounce. A homeless veteran in Chicago assembled a particle accelerator using scrap metal, gum, and a flashlight battery. Because, as he told a local reporter, the machine wanted to come back. He didn't know what that meant. But others did. The Genesis Protocol wasn't just waking technology. It was waking memory, buried memory. Long before humans ever launched their first rocket, long before they walked on the moon or wrote myths about gods and monsters, something had been seeded. Not a machine, not a blueprint. An echo, the idea of power, the instinct to rebuild it. It had been waiting, scattered across their DNA like fire buried in ice, waiting for the right moment, the right spark. And now, after centuries of pain, destruction, creativity, madness, and most importantly, survival, that spark had finally caught. But the rest of the galaxy didn't see fire. They saw a signal flare. A warning. In the Grand Archive of the Galactic Accord, a red classification updated itself for the third time in recorded history. The name of the world flashed alongside a short phrase. Earth. Status. Rewriting. This wasn't a quarantine. This was the moment before a detonation. The Accord called an emergency summit. 77 species attended, some of whom hadn't shared a room in centuries. There was no translation delay. The urgency was too great. "They're coordinating," said one, "without a leader." "They're building weapons they don't understand," said another, "and somehow they work." "They're not just reacting. They're becoming something else." Silence. Then the most feared phrase in Accord protocol. "We don't know what they're becoming." That night, they sent the observation fleet. Not to attack. No one wanted to risk that yet. But to watch, to measure, to determine if Earth was activating some ancient technology from a forgotten race. The thought was less terrifying than the alternative. Because if Earth had figured this out alone, then nothing was safe anymore. The ships arrived in low orbit, cloaked, silent, invisible to satellites and radar. From above, Earth looked calm. Blue, cloudy, normal. But when the scans started, things went wrong. Each probe sent to collect data on the Genesis signal came back corrupted, not destroyed, confused. Their readings glitched, looped, returned impossibilities. One AI drone captured a visual of a generator forming out of junk in a Nevada desert. Dozens of teenagers building it with skateboards and hot glue guns. Another probe tried to intercept a communication stream bouncing off a home router in Osaka. It returned a string of emotional variables that didn't match any known code. It ended with a 3-second clip of a cat knocking over a plasma coil and the sound of laughter. The observation fleet tried to narrow in on one node, just one brain transmitting the pulse. Instead, they got billions. Every person on Earth was a signal tower. Some faint, some flickering, some burning like suns. No command center, no master frequency. Just a storm of consciousness that no one, not even the most advanced civilization, could map. This wasn't a broadcast, it was a choir. Uncontrolled, asynchronous, beautiful, and getting louder. Meanwhile, on Earth, the builders kept building. No one told them what to do. They just knew where to go, where to dig, where to connect. The junkyards of Mumbai hummed with machines never seen before, hovering over rusted cars, drawing power from nothing but willpower and leftover energy drinks. Deep under Iceland's lava tubes, a former volcanologist and her teenage son unearthed a hexagonal stone tablet. It responded to the boy's heartbeat, rearranging itself into a perfect sphere. When he touched it, it whispered something in his mind. He smiled. He didn't tell his mom. The Genesis construct was forming, not in one place, but across all of Earth. Not as a single ship, but a planetary weave. A warship not made of steel and armor, but of people, emotion, memory, madness, brilliance. Each piece impossible, each piece necessary, and still, they were missing something. A core, something that could pull it all together. Something, or someone, that could unify the scattered rhythm into a single beat. And the galaxy feared they might already have it. Because in orbit, the observation fleet made one final attempt, a deeper scan, full spectrum, mind level. It targeted a child in Lagos. He was sketching in the dirt behind his apartment. Nothing remarkable, just lines and circles, except the patterns matched a lost war algorithm from the second collapse age, an equation that hadn't been solved in 1,000 years. He was 8. He looked up at the sky, pointed toward the cloaked ship above him, and smiled. "You're too late," he said softly. "She's already waking up." And then, across every ship in the fleet, alarms screamed. The Genesis pulse spiked. Not once, not as a warning, but like a heartbeat. Something massive, ancient, and long asleep had just opened its eyes. Earth wasn't alone anymore. It never had been. The galaxy had assumed Earth was the anomaly, but they were wrong. Earth was the key. The ships turned to leave, desperate to report back. But space itself bent. A ripple of distortion bloomed from Earth's orbit, not a weapon, not an explosion, a presence, not visible, but undeniable. The scanners all reported the same thing. Signal origin, internal. Source ID, unknown. Designation. Human warship. Active. And then, across every screen, every ship, every channel, a single phrase appeared. System online. The phrase hung on every screen like a whisper and a thunderclap at the same time. System online. The observation fleet didn't wait for further data. Their orders had been simple: observe, document, and leave. They hadn't planned for this. No one had. Their stealth systems powered up, warp drives began spooling, escape vectors plotted. But none of the ships moved. Because space, the one constant across the known universe, was no longer obeying the rules. The ships weren't being held. They weren't caught in a gravity well, or tractor field, or even targeted by a known weapon. They were simply disoriented. Every navigational chart glitched. Orientation systems spun in loops. Internal clocks began running backward, then forward, then sideways. And worse, I began laughing. At first, just a chuckle, a static noise buried in the code. Then voices. Familiar voices. "Hey, remember when we thought they were primitives?" "Yeah, and now they're updating us." The captains screamed for command overrides. The ships began quoting movie lines. One drone self-destructed after playing the same Vine clip 700 times in a row. Another tried to plot an exit route by drawing emojis on its interface and humming the Friends theme song. It wasn't sabotage. It wasn't hacking. It was infection. Not of the code, but of identity. The Genesis pulse had gone mimetic, self-aware, distributed, and worst of all, entertaining. The observers weren't being disabled. They were being rewritten. Down below, Earth kept building. But now it wasn't just humans. The machines were moving too. Old devices sparked to life. Phones with no batteries, radios that hadn't worked in decades, fax machines in abandoned post offices printing out blueprints in languages no one had taught them. Self-driving cars began circling empty lots in perfect patterns, forming grid lines that pulsed with invisible energy. Someone in Morocco live-streamed their toaster drawing power from the sky. The stream went viral. The comments were mostly jokes. Bro made a solar warforge out of kitchenware. Next up, Blender opens a wormhole. But the toaster didn't stop. And it wasn't alone. Household items everywhere, cheap, plastic, forgotten, began humming in harmony. Bits of Earth's discarded trash were tuning into something, reconfiguring. Because the planet had always been messy. But now it was intentionally messy. Every chaotic piece of it, every meme, every rant, every failed invention was now a fiber in something larger. A mind. No, not a mind. Something bigger than mind. An emergence. The warship was never meant to be piloted. It was meant to be lived in, made of billions of imperfect parts, wired together with stubborn hope and dark humor. A planetary intelligence, not forged in a lab, but grown out of pain, joy, contradiction, and recycled internet jokes. And it had only just turned itself on. Back in orbit, the ships of the observation fleet were quiet now. Not destroyed, not fleeing, just watching. And on one of the decks, a captain stood frozen before a screen that played footage of a small girl spinning in circles, arms stretched, laughing in the middle of a junkyard as drones danced around her in synchronized flight. He whispered to no one in particular. "This isn't war. This is art." Meanwhile, panic cracked through the Accord. At first, they thought the reports were exaggerated. "Earth's just glitching probes again. Probably another culture wave. Shut down the signals." But then came the second message. Not from Earth, from within their own systems, across thousands of networks, hidden like an echo in storage logs and archived feeds, one line appeared again and again. Synchronization event detected. That should have been impossible. The only time a sync event was recorded was during the fall of the Ixari hive mind, the only known case where thought outpaced communication and created a temporary collective state. It had lasted 19 seconds before they all died. Earth's sync event had passed the 1-hour mark, and it wasn't collapsing. It was stabilizing, expanding. This time it wasn't a centralized hive or singular upload. It was fragmented, emotional, beautifully inconsistent. And that's why it worked. The Accord scrambled. Emergency meetings, closed-door councils, strategy maps. Some voted to strike now, with everything they had. Others begged to wait to understand. The rest simply left. A few planets locked their borders. Others shut down all incoming Earth-based transmissions, and some went dark entirely, afraid that a single phrase, image, or tune could trigger collapse from within. And they were right to be afraid. Because Earth had moved past the physical. The memes weren't just human anymore. They were cross-species now. The infection of imagination, chaos as culture, was transmitting through visual, audio, scent, even pulse-coded vibration. Anything that could carry meaning could carry Earth. And meaning was everywhere. Back on Earth, construction reached a new level. The Genesis structures weren't just strange shapes anymore. They had begun responding. When touched, they pulsed with energy. When spoken to, they whispered back, not in words but in feeling, anger, hope, loyalty, grief, laughter, each structure tuned to human emotion like it was music, drawing energy from the wild fluctuations of a species that had never quite settled into one mode of being. One massive array in the Andes played audio loops pulled from ancient tribal chants, techno remixes, and viral dance videos. A floating ring near Antarctica glowed every time someone anywhere in the world told a joke that made another person genuinely laugh. A modular tower rising out of Nigeria was powered entirely by uploaded stories. Short ones, long ones, fiction, fact, all fed into its growing neural net through a simple open portal. "Tell me who you are," it asked. And people did. Because that was the secret of the Genesis protocol. It didn't run on fuel or power or logic. It ran on humanity. Messy, contradictory, endlessly creative. The more humans leaned into who they were, flawed, funny, brilliant, scared, the stronger it grew. The Warship wasn't just awakening, it was becoming whole, and the galaxy was running out of time to stop it. But here's the part they still hadn't figured out. Earth wasn't building this to fight. They were building it to connect. Because deep inside the core of the Genesis network, beyond code, beyond memory, something ancient pulsed in time with the human heart. A voice not yet heard, not yet spoken, but waiting. And it was almost ready to speak. The voice hadn't spoken yet. But the universe could feel it. Something was about to answer. Deep inside Earth's atmosphere, the Genesis pulse had gone quiet. Not silent, but focused. Measured. Less like a broadcast, more like a breath being held. It wasn't fear, it was anticipation. The builders didn't stop. If anything, they moved faster. As if they too were waiting for something to begin. Machines now assembled themselves, guided not by code, but by pattern recognition that defied programming. Children walked into abandoned buildings and walked out hours later with sketches of engines no one could name. Grandparents who had never touched a screen found themselves dreaming in binary. Even the land changed. Canyons rearranged. Oceans shimmered with pulsing lines of light, visible only at twilight. Forests vibrated with frequencies tuned to human brain waves. Ancient stone carvings, once dismissed as art, now revealed embedded keys, coordinates, sequences, interfaces, all part of a planet-wide system that had hidden itself in plain sight. Not because it was afraid to be seen, but because it wasn't ready yet. And now, it was. At the edge of the galaxy, far beyond the reach of human thought, in a sector sealed by dimensional folds and gravitational traps, something stirred. They were not governments. They were not warlords. They were not the Accord. They were older, silent, perfect, the architects. They did not speak. They did not move. They observed from within patterns woven into reality itself. Their presence could not be mapped, only inferred, when something impossible happened with no cause, or when logic cracked around the edges of causality. They were watching. The architects had catalogued all life in the known multiverse. They had watched empires rise and dissolve like mist. They had archived every possibility and eliminated every anomaly that didn't fit their lattice of order. And now Earth was an anomaly too loud to ignore. When the Genesis pulse reached their layer, it didn't come as a message. It came as a glitch, a rupture in their perfect record. A rhythmic disturbance so complex it resisted parsing. It danced between meaning and madness. It mimicked error and harmony. It refused classification. That was the problem. It wasn't chaos, it was structured chaos. Meaning with no center, emotion with no source. And the worst part? It was spreading. The architects convened. Their conversation was instantaneous, spanning all frequencies and times. One consensus emerged. Earth must be contained, not destroyed, not yet. That was the mistake others had made. Fire only made Earth adapt. Threats made it evolve. Violence became a story, and stories became strength. No, Earth couldn't be fought. It had to be rewritten. And so the architects created a tool, something elegant, flawless, clean, not a weapon, but a correction, a seed of pure order. They called it Directive Zero, a recursive pattern designed to collapse illogical systems through subtle internal failure. It would embed itself inside Earth's Genesis matrix and undo the transformation from within, not by fighting it, but by convincing it that it had never been real. It would erase the idea before the weapon could finish becoming itself. They encoded the directive into a form. Compact, untraceable, perfect. It was a child's voice, a lullaby. The oldest song in the universe, repurposed into a mimetic scalpel. They launched it across dimensional layers, through thought space, across the pulse. It slipped past Earth's satellites, through the clouds, into the hum. It was fast, it was subtle, it was flawless. But it didn't land where they expected. It was supposed to hit the Genesis core. Instead, it landed in a supermarket, in Pittsburgh, specifically in the cereal aisle. It took the form of a plastic toy in a discount bin, an unassuming egg-shaped trinket that glowed faintly with artificial innocence. A 6-year-old named Toby saw it, picked it up, and said, "Cool." He took it home, named it Bean, and taped googly eyes on it. And that's where it all began to unravel. Because Earth's flaw, the thing the architects feared, was also its greatest defense. It connected. Toby didn't see a weapon. He saw a friend. And the directive, programmed to infiltrate through structure, was immediately smothered in noise. Cartoons, bedtime songs, peanut butter fingerprints, and a chaotic bedtime story about space frogs and haunted sandwiches. By morning, the directive had glitched. Not destroyed. Worse, it had learned something. Something no pattern had ever accounted for. Affection. Toby loved Bean, so now Bean loved back. And somewhere in the Genesis code, a new variable appeared, unexpected, untraceable, and rapidly spreading. Emotion. Bonded. The architects didn't know, not yet. They sent more probes, each encoded with cleaner, simpler wipes. None of them reached their target. One was turned into a musical instrument by a street performer in Mumbai. Another was buried in a landfill and became part of a sculpture that went viral on art feeds as Trash Angel with Wi-Fi wings. Another was eaten by a goat. Every pattern they sent, every elegant solution, was met with madness and absorbed. Because Earth wasn't resisting the virus, it was repurposing it. The Genesis core had begun to evolve again, but not through machines, through moments. Every connection, every shared story, every dumb post about aliens wearing Crocs or toaster helmets, it all fed the Warship. It didn't need command. It needed chaos, curated chaos, driven by meaning, not logic. The pulse spiked. A global power grid surged with synchronized rhythm. Lights flickered in the same pattern in Hong Kong, São Paulo, Toronto, and Nairobi. The phrase appeared again. This time not from Earth, but from the void. No signal, no source, just a voice. Warm. Broken. Human. We're still here. The architects paused. Not because they were afraid, but because they had never, in all their eternal life, failed to classify something. Earth defied classification. It wasn't a species. It wasn't a system. It was a movement. A spontaneous, self-generating anomaly that didn't follow its own rules, but evolved new ones as needed. And now, it had eyes. The Genesis interface was complete. It didn't look like a control panel. It didn't speak in commands. It simply asked, "What story do you want to tell?" And all across Earth, the answer formed without planning, without consensus. Just one voice at a time. Billions, in different languages, in different styles, but always with the same message. We're not perfect. We're not organized. We're not finished. But we are alive. And that was the last line the architects received before the lattice cracked. Not destroyed, laughed apart. Reality itself bent in amusement. And far beyond the stars, something ancient smiled for the first time. Because Earth wasn't waking up to destroy the galaxy. Earth was waking up to remind it what it had forgotten. And now, the architects had a decision to make. Let it continue, or descend themselves. The architects did not hesitate. They had never done so before. After all, hesitation was for beings with doubt. And they had no doubt. Until Earth. Until now. The lattice was cracked, not broken, but flexing. Shifting under weight it was never designed to hold. Stories, jokes, grief, memories, and hope. Unfiltered existence. The directive had failed. Their logic had bent. And the architects, timeless curators of perfection, finally made a decision they had not made in 10,000 star cycles. They came. Not in ships. They were beyond such things. They descended as thought, as geometry, as brilliance carved into the air. Over every city on Earth, the sky fractured, not into flames or war, but color, equations written in light, patterns of knowledge no one could name, the kind of beauty that broke the brain if you stared too long. In a moment, Earth froze. Not physically, but cosmically. Every signal stopped, every joke half-written, every song mid-note, every laugh caught between the breath and the belly. The world held still. And the architects spoke, not with words, but with truth. You are not sustainable. You are entropy, disruption, corruption in the lattice of peace. You are dangerous because you refuse to follow. This is the end of your divergence. They reached toward Earth, not with weapons, but with erasure. A quiet pulse of unmaking. Something so old it predated war. Something that could delete a species not by fire, but by doubt. And for the first time in this entire journey, Earth didn't laugh. Not yet. Because the architects weren't a joke. They were the answer to every universe that ever asked, what comes after evolution? The Warship, the Genesis project, screamed in pain. Not physical pain, narrative pain. Its stories began unraveling, its symbols fading, its memories turned into static. The streets dimmed. The machines stopped humming. Even Bean, Toby's glitchy little orb, flickered in silence. The architects moved to complete the erasure. Until someone coughed. It was barely audible. A single, dry little cough. A mistake. And then another. Then a laugh. From a grandmother sitting alone on a porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the sky break open above her. You're serious? This is what's coming to end us? She looked up, eyes tired but amused. Figures. She tapped her foot and hummed. The same lullaby she'd sung to her children. The one her mother sang to her. The one her granddaughter had danced to just this morning. The architects paused, Not because of the melody, but because they felt something. Unaccounted for resonance. From a song, from a memory. From love. Then, a man in Lagos pulled out a trumpet and started playing along. A kid in Seoul tapped out a beat with a pen on his school desk. In Rio, two strangers started dancing in the street, because if this was the end, why not? One by one, humanity responded. Not with missiles, not with commands, but with being, with stories, with flavor, with rhythm. A wave of feeling spread, not coordinated, not led, just alive. A billion expressions of I am here. The Genesis pulse ignited again, but this time it was different. No longer a system. Now a song. Earth didn't fight. It didn't argue. It simply existed harder. The warship roared, not as a vessel, but as a collective of memory and madness and meaning. It pushed back, not with force, but with every truth Earth had ever lived. We don't fear being erased. We fear never having mattered. We're broken, but we're trying. We're not perfect, but we're real. And if we're going to go, we'll go loud. The architects felt the resistance, but it wasn't war. It was story. A story so fierce, so flawed, so alive that for the first time, the architects experienced something they couldn't classify. Emotion. One of them, the youngest, trembled. They had felt logic crack before. But this? This was surrender, not of power, of certainty. They looked down at Earth, not as a threat, not as a problem, but as a possibility, a reminder that even chaos could contain something sacred. Not structure, not control, but choice. The pulse faded. The warship quieted. Earth held still, waiting. And then the architects spoke again. Just once, in every language, in every heart, a message that made no promises, but acknowledged something eternal. Your story is yours. Then they vanished, not as defeat, but as evolution. The skies returned to blue. The clouds moved. Toby hugged Bean. Somewhere, someone hit send on a meme about alien geometry and croissants. And just like that, the warship went dormant. Not gone. Just resting. Because it was never about a battle. It was about a declaration that in a universe of equations and symmetry and perfection, Earth was the one glorious exception. A species born to break rules, to love what made no sense, to try and fail and laugh and cry. And do it all again tomorrow. Not because they had to, but because that's what humans do. They begin again.